They didn't ask, they decided. That was always how it went. And like always, I was supposed to nod, smile, and carry the weight without complaint. My name is Rachel Connors. I'm 28, a senior accountant at a firm nobody outside finance has heard of. My life has been quiet, orderly, deliberately uneventful. No drama, no damage. Every piece of stability I have, I built with my own hands, my degree, my job, my credit. Even the second-hand table in my kitchen, no handouts, no shortcuts. But if you asked my family, they'd say I'm the cold one. Not because I yelled or stormed out or betrayed them, but because I stopped being the one who cleaned up after their disaster stopped my older sister. Erin is 2 years ahead of me, but always 5 steps behind. She has a talent for turning every failure into someone else's responsibility. Another lost job. Her boss was toxic, evicted again. Roommates were jealous. Bills piling up. She was trying her best. And my parents, Carol and Frank, never questioned any of it. They just rearranged their lives around her wreckage. And if they couldn't, they turned to me. You're stable, Rachel. You're lucky you can help. That sentence clung to me for years like a shadow. Help with the car payment, help with rent, help with bail. Always help. And a few times I refused. Suddenly I was the selfish one. I learned early that my worth wasn't in being loved, it was in being useful. But usefulness has limits. And that night, they were about to run headfirst into mine that Sunday dinner's in. Our family had a rhythm, the same casserole, the same table, the same unspoken pressure disguised as politeness. But that evening, I felt the performance before I even sat down. Mom greeted me with a smile stretched too wide, asking if I was eating enough. Dad muttered a distracted, "Hey, kiddo." Erin was already glued to her phone, avoiding my eyes. I knew the signs. Sweetness from Mom, silence from Dad. It meant they were about to drop something I wouldn't like. We made it through the salad and strained small talk. Then Mom set down her fork, folded her hands, and delivered her practice guilt-laced smile. "Rachel, we've been talking. Erin's had a rough time lately, and she'd be moving in with you for a little while." Just like that, no request, no discussion. As if it were already decided, I looked at Erin. She flicked her eyes up, then away. Dad cleared his throat, bracing for my refusal, but instead I smiled lightly. "Of course," I said. "If it helps Erin get back on her feet, I don't see why not." The silence that followed was sharp. Mom blinked. Dad exhaled in relief. Erin leaned back with a smugness she didn't bother to hide. They all thought I'd caved. What they didn't know, what none of them had thought to ask, was that I hadn't lived in that condo for weeks. And I had no intention of letting Erin move into a place that no longer existed. It hadn't happened overnight. It took years of quiet disappointments, of sacrifices erased, of realizing that in my family, I was never seen as a daughter, only a resource. When Erin's car was repossessed at 21, I co-signed because she swore this job was different. 3 weeks later, she stopped showing up, and I carried the debt. At 23, when my parents were behind on the mortgage, I wired $2,000 without hesitation. At Christmas, my reward was a novelty mug, "World's Best Daughter." At 25, Erin got a DUI. I paid for the lawyer to protect the family's reputation. She didn't even thank me. The second DUI, I refused. Mom called me cold, said Erin's life was harder than mine. That was the moment I stopped hoping they'd ever see me. Piece by piece, I began to pull away. I stopped saying yes. I stopped being available. And one night, sitting in the condo I'd worked so hard for, I realized it didn't feel like mine anymore. My home had become their safety net. My time, my money, my patience, it was all ours, never mine. So I made a choice. Quietly, deliberately, I sold it. I moved into a small rental across town. No one asked where, and I didn't volunteer the truth, not out of cruelty, out of self-preservation. Sometimes disappearing just enough is the only way to breathe. By Monday, the messages started. Plans about moving Erin's things, boxes, mattresses, her excitement to have her own space. I didn't reply. By Thursday, Mom was texting daily. Erin says she won't be a burden. That one made me laugh out loud. Saturday morning, I left early. Coffee, then a long walk through a farmer's market. My phone buzzed over and over, with calls I ignored until finally I answered. Mom's voice wasn't sweet anymore. It was sharp with panic. Rachel, what's going on? There's someone here. He says he lives in the condo. Says you don't live here anymore? I let the silence stretch until she demanded again. I answered evenly. I sold the condo weeks ago. You what? Her voice cracked. I moved. Out, quietly. No one asked where, so I didn't say. For a moment, nothing. I pictured them standing there with Erin's boxes, realizing they'd planned an invasion only to arrive at a stranger's door. Then Dad's voice cut through. You lied to us. No, for the first time in my life, I thought I hadn't lied. I just stopped playing the role they wrote for me. I said, if it helps Erin, I don't see why not. But I never said where. That silence hung heavier than any shout. A sharp inhale from my mother, then from Erin. Finally, Erin's voice cracked through, not angry, but small, uncertain. So, what now? We're just supposed to figure it out? For a fleeting second, I almost softened, almost answered. But I didn't, because what they never understood was that this wasn't about anger or revenge or teaching them a lesson. I hadn't changed the locks out of spite. I hadn't sold the condo to prove a point. I had done it because I was tired of living in a home that never felt like mine. I did it because I deserved to cross my own threshold without bracing for impact. Because sometimes the kindest thing you can do for people who refuse to change is to stop giving them space to ruin yours. They thought that was the end, but I knew better. Even as I sipped my morning coffee, letting their calls pile up unanswered, I knew Mom wouldn't stop. She'd dig, she'd push, she'd show up too. Prove that no matter where I moved, I was still theirs to claim. By sunset, the knock came. 3 sharp raps. Too polite to be angry, too clipped to be calm. Through the peephole, my mother, flushed and frazzled. My father, jaw tight. Erin, arms folded, their car crammed with boxes like it was moving day. I opened the door halfway. You found me, I said flatly. Mom's voice trembled with restrained fury. We tried calling. We didn't think you'd actually, she faltered. It's my apartment. I cut in. Dad's voice rose, anger spilling through. You said she could move in, and here we are, with all her things. And now you're acting like we're strangers. I stayed still, calm. I never said she could move in here. I said, if it helps Erin, I don't see why not. That was about the old place, the one I don't live in anymore. Erin stepped forward, her face blotched red with fury, not shame. This is petty, Rachel. You always act like you're better than everyone, but this is cruel. I tilted my head. You packed your life into boxes and drove across the city to move into an apartment you never confirmed still existed. That's not cruelty, Erin. That's entitlement. Her voice cracked, desperate. You're my sister. Yes, I said evenly. And you've spent years confusing that with free housing? Dad's tone turned cold, a warning. Enough. Rachel, we're not leaving. We've put up with a lot from you. You owe this to your sister. There it was. The word that had always lurked between the lines, oh. As if every dollar, every sleepless night, every sacrifice I'd made had been part of some invisible contract I never signed. I stepped back, picked up my phone. Mom's eyes narrowed. What are you doing? I didn't answer. I dialed 3 rings, then 911. What's your emergency? My family is outside my apartment, I said calmly. They refuse to leave. They're not on the lease. They weren't invited. I'd like to report trespassing. The silence that followed was louder than any scream. Erin's mouth fell open. Dad cursed under his breath. Mom looked as if I'd slapped her. Rachel, she whispered, almost pleading. You're calling the police on your own family? I asked you to leave, I replied. You didn't. The dispatcher asked for my address. I gave it. Erin's voice broke into fury. This is going to ruin everything. Do you know what people will think? What they'll say about you? Yes, I said. They'll say I finally stopped opening the door. Mom's eyes filled, her voice fragile now. You used to be kind. You used to notice when I was hurting. I didn't flinch, because kindness had been mistaken for servitude too many times. 10 minutes later, a patrol car pulled up. The officer stepped out, steady and calm. Evening, she said. We received a call about trespassing. That's me, I confirmed that she. Turned to my parents. Sir, ma'am, you'll need to leave. This is her residence. You can't occupy it without permission. Erin's face crumpled into something between a sob and a snarl. You'll regret this, Rachel. No, I told her. I've regretted almost everything up until now. This is the first thing I'm sure of. The next morning, my phone lit up with missed calls. Mom, Dad, numbers I didn't recognize. Then the texts poured in accusations, guilt trips. Please. And finally, a public Facebook post from my mother. 3 paragraphs of heartbreak emojis, an old photo of Erin as a toddler, and a narrative where I was the villain. Hundreds of likes. Dozens of comments. People I hadn't spoken to in years calling me selfish, cold, ungrateful. For a long while, I just stared at the screen. Then quietly, I posted back. Screenshots. The $2,000 mortgage payment. My name tied to Erin's repossessed car loan. The lawyer's invoice for her DUI. A list of every time I'd bailed them out since I was 21. And finally, a screenshot of a message Erin once sent me, calling me a boring robot because I wouldn't let her crash for a month. I ended with one line. I didn't abandon my family. I just stopped volunteering for emotional debt. Then, I shut off my phone, not out of fear, out of peace. For once, I didn't need applause or validation. I just needed quiet. And at last, I had it. That night, the apartment was still. No buzzing phone. No knocks at the door. Just the hum of the fridge and the creak of old pipes. I made tea chamomile. Not for sleep. I didn't need help sleeping anymore. Just for the ritual. Steam rising, soft and forgiving. Messages blinked across the screen, but I didn't open. Them, I knew their rhythm. Shock, anger, guilt, pleading, always in that order. I blocked the numbers. Not out of cruelty, but because some doors don't deserve to be left open forever. I stepped onto the balcony. The night air was cold, alive. Below me, the city hummed headlights, footsteps, someone walking a dog in a coat too big for spring. A neighbor waved from 2 floors down. I waved back, simple, real. Inside, I switched off the lights one by one. Living room, kitchen, hallway. No family photos, no guilt woven into the walls. Just quiet. Just space. I didn't feel triumphant. Or broken. Just finished. Done performing. Done apologizing for needing my own life. Somewhere out there, they were rewriting the story again, painting me as the villain, the cold one, the ungrateful daughter. Let them, because I didn't disappear. I just stopped letting them pretend I never had a life of my own.